Okay. Hi, you. How are you today?
I'm good. Hi, Junko.
I'm so excited to actually talk to you today because you came back from China a couple of weeks ago, Shanghai Auto. And really, the point that I want to make with this hot takes is that this is not your first rodeo. In other words, this is not the first time you went to auto show in China. So tell us the what you have observed over the last several years attending different auto shows in China.
Yeah, that's very nice to start from. And as just mentioned, actually, I'm a long time already in the automotive industry. So, in the past years, I have followed the Shanghai and the Beijing. You know that they are alternatively every year, and for pretty long while. And since my last visit, I would say is after the COVID. I think the first one was back to 2023, and for me was kind of a wow because before, I mean, in all the previous auto shows, you see the focus will always kind of the international brands, the global badges, and the people are always looking for Volkswagen, looking for Toyota, what they are doing. But for me, is that in 2023, see a big change. That the
Ah,
Chinese OEMs is really getting into the center of the stage. So that's kind of a big change I pick up from that year. And later on, I think last year was Beijing's turn. And so the things I see is also quite witnessed is the change or the shifting of the industrial focus. Before was kind of EV, I call it electrification. And since last year, we really see that it's people are really shifting the focus to more autonomous drive, ADAS kind of features. So that's something my main pickup last year. And I mean, everybody knows that since this year, that especially like BYD, like GD, like Chang'an, all the leading automakers, they are trying to also really pushing all the ADAS technology or L2 plus to the kind of more mainstream, more budget models. So that's really kind of proved the things we've seen there. And this year is also another for me, another wow moment for me again. I mean, that's always kind of my feeling in China, even as a Chinese myself. And it's quite interesting things that compared before was always the OEMs. They are the spotlight. But this year they are a little bit kind of more quiet. But what I pick up is that the really fast growing of the local supply chain, and especially with the automotive chips, as I think probably will also unfold it a little bit later. That's really a big kind of progress in the past year or yeah 12 maybe 20 months. That's something I would say is really my highlight for this year.
that's interesting. I think as a member of the press, I think a lot of reporters discovered auto show in China this year, right? Because there was so many big news coming out of BYD and Geely and so forth. But what you're really saying is the trajectory, changes that are happening in China. And I remember the time that, as you said, more of a EV centric China automotive industry. And then suddenly we start hearing about what is it? Autopilot on highway or highway or
Yeah, it's called
what is called in
highway
Chinese?
NOA.
Yeah, okay. So
Navigation on autopilot. Yeah.
yeah. So that became kind of in the center. But this year, I think your observation, nobody else is making that much, is the focus on tier two. And here we're talking about both global and more importantly, domestic players, right? Tell us more about this ecosystem China itself has begun to build.
Yeah, and actually, I mean, for me, it's always a kind of interesting difference between the Chinese automotive industry and also the rest of the world. I mean, I also follow up the activities in Europe and also in the US, also in Japan. And I mean, you will always find more content of chips in China. I mean, even in the past years, that's kind of things already. I mean, you noticed it immediately. But for this year, I really want to put my focus there is that first of all, the number of really tier twos from automotive semiconductors, they are really kind of booming. I'm not having a really accurate statistics, but just by estimation, I think it's something like 15 to 20% of the part suppliers. they're actually tier 2 chip providers. It's really a big show for automotive, but actually you found, okay, so many tier 2s there. I mean, just for example, Intel. Their first time, I think, in the worldwide, that's in the auto show, and which is in Shanghai Auto Show, and also they are among the really big OEMs. So that's already a proof. And then you have also the other names like MediaTek, like Samsung, and all they are among the other suppliers in the Shanghai Auto Show. And more important for me, and also I think that's also we are discussing quite a lot, is that the growth of the local industry. And I would say it's from two perspectives. First is from the wideness, how wide the suppliers they are covering. I mean, we know that we call it automotive semiconductor, but actually at Yole, we are kind of classified into 10 type of semiconductor devices. For example, if it's image sensor or it's memory, then they are very different. They have come from very different supply chains. So that's why we split into kind of 10 different types. And I would say is that before China is more on the power, for example, on power electronics, also on the advanced SoCs for ADAS and also for smart cockpit functions. But this time I would say is that basically you are seeing the emerging players, or some already have very solid result in basically all the categories of the devices we have been following. So that's one thing. And also secondly is that how deep they are. I think it's if you see is that some of them, especially the local players, for example, like say Horizon or Black Sesame, I mean they're not only competitive in China, but also they are also getting a lot of cooperations with the international OEMs. So that's also pretty amazing for me to see is that how advanced they are already in the supply chain.
Yeah, and also that when you say supply chain, we're talking about the really the foundational ecosystem getting more mature to support the automotive industry in China, right?
Yeah, that's true. And also, I think in the past year, we also know that there is a quite strong push to have the chip localized in China. But before, okay, we know some of them, let's say power, they are doing quite well. Some of them, let's say advanced MCUs or some of the advanced SoCs is much more challenging. And also sometimes some of specific sensors or maps, because they are very niche market, I would say. And also you don't have a lot of players. But from the things I can pick up there is that almost everything they are just catching up and also pushed very strongly. And I think that's also on the one side is that the local supply chain is also really booming there. And also on the other side, I would say it's also kind of alarm to the other players in the whole supply chain, because then I mean you are facing a kind of a total market like that size, and if not everything's growing dramatically, then you have to also expect the competitions coming, I would say. Yeah.
Right. I have one last question, which I hadn't asked before, is that in the West, a lot of traditional OEMs made noises that they also want to be not just auto companies, they also want to design their own semiconductors, right? So that was a big headlines for the last few years, but we haven't seen a lot actually. Now, what's going on in China? Have you actually seen chips that are coming out of big Chinese OEMs? Where are they?
That's a very nice question. Actually, we have been following that up very closely in the past years. And at Yole, we developed a model we call the Triple C, just to help OEM to really dedicate it to OEMs to build up their semiconductor strategy. And I think we have even sometimes a comparison to see the position of the Chinese OEM and the rest of the world. And regarding your question, I mean, we can go a little bit into the detail. For example, I think I can give you a few examples, especially from the EV startups. I think for example, the Turing chip from XPeng. So that's really a chip that is for the ADAS systems, and it's already, I think, tape out. So they are going to be put into the new car, I think, in the coming months. And also some other things like, say, the power electronics really designed by the OEM themselves. That's already running on the cars. So that's, I mean, things are quite clear for everybody, but I think the difference is that Chinese goes a little bit faster.
All right, very good. This is I think we have to do part two sometimes later, but this was a lot of fun. I learned a lot. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Junko. Yeah, nice to talk to you always, as always.